Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Cardano and its native token ADA, searching for a cycle bottom. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the Black Friday sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. We will run that for a few more days. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, in order to really assess where we are today, I would propose we go back and sort of look at what we were talking about a while back, right? If we sort of go back through some of the months. And the reason for that is because, we can always get quite comfortable with a bull market. We can also get comfortable with a bear market. And so sometimes it can be useful to sort of see where we have come from over the last several months. And then we'll talk about where we are today and what are the general implications of it. So two of the most recent videos I did on ADA, admittedly, I haven't been doing as many videos on ADA this year, but you guys are should be fully aware of why. And that's essentially because I've said many times, altcoins remain too risky for me in these overall macro bear markets where Bitcoin is bleeding and risk assets in general are bleeding. And I've lost a lot of money in the past riding altcoins all the way down like 95%, 98%. And so, when we're in a bear market, I choose not to go trying to catch falling knives. But I do want us to try to understand where we are today, and sort of see some of the updated indicators. So, if you go back to look at kind of where we were, I don't know, half a year ago, Bitcoin was at 30K and ADA was, I guess here it was around 60 cents or so. And we sort of talked about, this being one potential scenario where ADA would just simply see a further 60% correction from that level, right? Getting us somewhere between 10 and 20 cents for a potential bottom. We also discussed this chart, and I think this chart, we're going to update it for this video, and I think it's actually quite insightful. This is what this chart looked like several months ago. And the whole idea was like, if we just compare the prior bear market to the current one, it could give us some insight into what is potentially possible. I'm not trying to say what has to happen or what will happen for sure. It's just saying, look, this is what has happened in the past, and you should be aware that it can happen again. So to first update this chart, this is what it looks like. So we went from this to this. It's not that surprising, right? I mean, this is essentially more or less what you could argue played out last cycle. Although one thing I've really been thinking about a lot this bear market is how for the altcoin market, I mean, there have been some pretty brutal drops. I mean, don't get me wrong, right? I mean, ADA from its peak now is down more than 90%, right? So that's just what it is, right? It's down 90%. There's no way you can look at that and say, it's holding up well or anything like that, right? It's just 90% down, and it just is what it is, right? It's an altcoin in a bear market, and that's what altcoins generally do in bear markets. And there are some altcoins that are down a lot more, right? 95%, 98%. There's also some altcoins that are not down quite as much. But right now, ADA sits at about 90% down from the all-time high. But remember, last cycle, we saw it go 98% down to arguably what was the bottom and the end of the bear market. Although because of because of what happened in 2020, we know we went just a bit lower. And so, you could look at this chart and say that the bear market ended right here. I'm not sure it's necessarily a fair assessment to say that the bear market did not end until March of 2020. I mean, this move here from 2 cents to 10 cents, this is a 5x move. It doesn't look like much, but a 5x move is a 5x move, right? It doesn't matter if it was because ADA went from 50 cents to 250 or if it went from 10 cents to 50 cents, right? A 5x move is a 5x move. So it might be fair to say that the bear market ended here in December of 2018, but we eventually did put in a lower low in March of 2020. And then, of course, we sort of sprung up into our bull market where we took out the prior all-time high. So one of the things to consider, though, when thinking about this chart is that this lower low was actually during a recession, a very brief one, and the Fed printed our way out of it. But there are plenty of indicators to suggest that we're heading for another recession. And it's impossible to time exactly when that's going to occur. I'd like to think it's going to occur in 2023, but if you look at the inversion of the yield curve, some of these things can just take a lot longer than you think it might. I mean, this is the inversion this is the spread on the 3-month and the 10-year. And you'll notice that it's a pretty good predictor of a recession, right? When it inverts like it has, we go into and then when it uninverts, we end up going into a recession. It's just impossible to know how much time we're going to spend down here before we see it, go back the other way and we get pushed into a recession. And note that normally it's during the recession that the S&P 500 bottoms, right? This is what normally happens. And so when you think about it like that, and we look at this prior bear market that really, if you want to include this lower low over here, lasted for about 800 days. Now, if you want to say that it stopped here, you could say it stopped after only 345 days. But if you say it stopped there, then the current ADA bear market has been lasting a good bit longer than the last one, to the tune of about 100 days so far. Now, the price drawdown hasn't been quite as bad, at least not yet, but it has just been a very systematic and slow bleed. And one of the things I've thought about, with regards to, I mean, not just ADA, but for a lot of these altcoins, is that, we had a bull market that is very dissimilar from prior bull markets, right? So like usually when we go into a mania phase, we don't really spend much time there, and then we come back down, and the capitulation is relatively quick, right? And it lasted about a year. ADA has already been going down since August of 2021. I mean, it's been going on well over a year at this point. Right? I mean, we're talking about, we're well past the year mark. So this bear market for ADA, if you say compare it to ending in December 2018, it's already lasted a lot longer. One of the reasons for that, though, if we think about this from maybe like a fundamental perspective, which is kind of crazy for this channel, but if we think about normally when people come in at the top, it's only, I mean, it is a lot of people, but in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, some people bought here, but then they're probably pretty quickly going to capitulate at the, at the first sign of weakness. Here, we spent a long time at these elevated levels. And so arguably this type of market structure where you get, say, like the double peak type cycle, just ends up being like a very slow bleed rather than a fairly quick capitulation, because it takes a long time for the market to sort of wring out a lot of the people that bought near these highs. And it's interesting is if you go back to my channel in 2019, we had plenty of videos on ADA when it was trading at like 2 cents and 3 cents and 4 cents. And, back then my general expectation was that ADA could probably make it to around $4, like $4 to $8. I mean, the receipts are there, right? We didn't quite make it that far. I mean, we made it to around $3, which is kind of crazy. I mean, it still went up 150x, right? 150x over those few years. But since then, again, we sort of peaked out at that $3 level, and now we're down. We find ourselves down about 90%, which again, I mean, over the last 3 quarters or so has been the general expectation that the altcoin market would continue to deteriorate. So when you look at this chart, there is part of me that wonders, right? There's part of me that wonders if this slow bleed could just simply continue well into 2023. I mean, it's already lasted longer than the last bear market if you take December as the bottom. And if you take March 2020 as the bottom, then there's nothing necessarily stopping ADA from just sort of continuing on this path. Now, another potential path, I suppose, is where we do see some type of, final move down followed by a sideways accumulation phase. But I mean, there's a real risk here of just a very slow bleed until we finally get a major bottom. And unlike prior cycles that we think about as like market structure, normally we get a pretty fast capitulation and then we retest it later on, right? Like capitulation after about a year, and then we kind of retest it about a year later. We might not see that same type of market structure this time, right? Like it could just simply be a slow bleed into the bottom, and then once the bottom's in, and we're not testing it again. And I think there's a chance that the same type of thing could happen with Bitcoin as well. But looking at this, if we take it 3 months out from the bottom, you can see that once it actually bottomed, it rebounded pretty quickly. And if you take it out to the next peak, You can kind of see what happened. I think, and I've said this before, right? 2022 is really, for me anyways, and this is not financial advice, but for me anyways, it has not been the year for altcoin accumulation. I think altcoin accumulation is pushed out until 2023 is sort of my base case right now. And again, one of the most common forms of criticism I've gotten during 2022 is, well, why not? Like, why not accumulate altcoins in 2022, because they're at a significant discount as to where they were. And I've often said that bull markets make you money, bear markets make you rich. But the reason why bear markets, I think, make you rich, and I've said this many times, is because they lead to the accumulation phase before the next bull run. Not because you YOLO'd all your money in on every single counter trend rally or bear market rally along the way. Right? I mean, this is the point, right? It's not, you're not gonna, like, looking at ADA USD, the people that bought this dip over here at 15 cents back in 2018, while eventually they were in the money, it took years, from mid 2018 until 2021 before, or, like 2021 or so, before they were actually, back making money on that trade. So yeah, I mean, in the short term, some of these, buying some of these local bottoms during the bear market can prove quite useful. Even the one here back in the summer, the one here back in February, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, you're gonna have bear market rallies. They have a way of drawing all the money, or a lot of the money, back into the market, so that by the time the market is actually at its major bottom, people just don't have, a lot of the people that just put all their money in during the bear market, they don't have really any more money to put in, and the people that were patient kind of come in and try to create that bottom. But then on the way back up, you have all these resistance levels from all the people that bought these, bear market rallies, just trying to get their money back. And then it just sort of takes a while to break through it. And then, they end up buying back higher later on, typically speaking. But, one of the things that we have to consider, and I've talked about this before, and that's, if we look at the volatility of bear markets with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and ADA, right? So if you think about the volatility of these bear markets, you might remember that in Bitcoin's first cycle, it went down about 94%. And then its second cycle, it sort of dropped down here to about 87% or so, right? 94, and then 87, and then 84. And I mean, we've talked about the idea of diminishing losses, but I mean, look, there's also a chance we might not see diminishing losses. I mean, you have 3 data points, but 3 data points, of course, does not necessarily make a trend. So far, Bitcoin is down 76%, 76, 77%. And so, I mean, the trend still exists, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that Ethereum, in its first cycle, right, in its first major bear market, it dropped around 95%, right? But ADA, in its first bear market, dropped like almost 99%, right? It was like 98.75%. If ADA, say, does have diminishing losses or something in this bear market, and say instead of dropping 98%, let's say it's one cycle behind Ethereum or something, let's suppose it drops 94 or 95%, right? Like a 95% drop from the all-time high would put ADA between 10 and 20 cents, right? That's where it would ultimately put it. And one of the things we talked about in this video, right, is that, look, this is the bear market resistance band is just continuing to provide resistance. We sort of drew out this scenario of popping back up to the resistance band and then just getting rejected once again. If we go look at what ADA did, I mean, yeah, that's basically what happened, right? It just went straight back up to the resistance band and got rejected once again. So, I think there's still a real risk of ADA continuing to sort of come down here, and then maybe trying to find some support down in this region, potentially between 10 and 20 cents, sometime potentially, like in 2023 or something, and then trying to form a bottom there, potentially how we outlined, half a year ago. Right. And the other way to sort of look at ADA is to look at its Bitcoin valuation. And this is actually quite interesting because, if you look at this with the same type of support band on here, and you look at where ADA USD bottomed, it bottomed in December of 2018. But ADA Bitcoin did not bottom until 2019. for ADA Bitcoin to get to the same level as it was last cycle when ADA USD hit its bottom, if you assume December was the bottom, ADA's valuation against Bitcoin would still need to drop about 55% or so. I mean, you're talking about another 50% drop. And if ADA's valuation against Bitcoin were to drop 55%, and it would likely have to correspond to Bitcoin seeing a pullback on its own, and then ADA just seeing a more significant pullback, then you could be talking about of course, a potential bottom. I mean, if ADA USD were to drop 55%, that would put it at around 13, 14 cents, right? But I mean, again, the ADA Bitcoin valuation would only drop by that same amount if Bitcoin USD were to stay constant, which is likely not going to happen. I'm not saying it has to go to this exact level. We're just sort of looking at hypotheticals here, like what was it at last cycle before the bottom on ADA USD was actually in. I know we saw eventually a slightly lower low because of that very brief recession that we had. But again, there still is evidence to suggest the recession is coming this time too. And it might be, it still could be 6 months away. It could be 12 months away. I don't know. I mean, maybe it'll correspond to the same type of timing here, where you just sort of see that slow bleed, and then finally we get some type of a bottom just before, maybe a few months before the next Bitcoin halving in early 2024, and then we go on our adventures once again and see kind of just how high it can go back up. But look, I mean, the one thing I don't want to do is use a bear market to constantly instill hopium when the reality, right? The reality of the situation is just it's in a bear market, and it just simply does not matter that much about a lot of the fundamentals of any project in a bear market. It's just they generally go down, and I think that's the case here. And if you look at ADA's valuation compared to sort of the deterioration of some of the other layer ones. Not Ethereum, of course, but some of the other sort of lower market cap layer ones, you could argue that ADA is holding its own. It has not been a part of some of these contagion events that we've seen. I mean, we've seen some altcoins go down quite a bit, and I mean, honestly, I think for good reason, right? I mean, I think for good reason. And you should also remember that in the grand scheme of altcoins, most will not see new all-time highs, right? It's just a fact. I mean, and you can go back and look at historical snapshots of the top 10, and what you'll notice is that a lot of altcoins just simply come and go. A lot of altcoins do not put in new all-time highs in future cycles. They just don't, right? It's just one and done, and their history, their toast, no one cares about them anymore. But ADA is one of the coins from 2017 that did put in a new all-time high. And I think that means something. I mean, I think it means something. Bitcoin put in a new all-time high. Ethereum put in a new all-time high. ADA put in a new all-time high. There's a lot of altcoins that didn't. And I mean, that's just a fact. We've seen it happen time and time again. And they just become sort of relics of a prior cycle. Okay? The other way, I mean, we've sort of looked at this with the ADA Bitcoin valuation. Another way to look at this is the ADA Ether valuation. And if you go back and watch my videos in 2019, one of the reasons I was happy to accumulate ADA at 2 cents was not because of its USD valuation, right? I mean, the USD valuation at 2 cents was nice because I thought ADA would go put in new highs. But what was nicer was the bottoming pattern on the ADA Ether pair. What was nicer was the bottoming pattern on the ADA Bitcoin pair. Right? That's what I cared about. That was what I was looking at. These were major things that you have to take in consideration when you're looking at the ADA Ether valuation, and it's sort of sticking around the low from September of 2019 and April of 2020 and December of 2020. I mean, to me, this just looked like it was building out a lot of support to support a move back up to the upper band. And that's exactly what happened. ADA Bitcoin, same type of thing, right? We talked about this exact range in some of those videos back then, and that was that we're just sort of building out a strong base to ultimately make a break up, right? If I'm being honest, I'm not convinced that this is sort of the ADA Bitcoin bottom, okay? And the reason is because the ADA Bitcoin bottom last cycle came after Bitcoin bottomed itself, about half a year later. Remember that. Bitcoin USD bottomed here, but ADA Bitcoin did not bottom until like half a year later. Bitcoin USD just put in a new low a few days ago, right? Just a few days ago. We don't know exactly when Bitcoin's valuation against the US dollar will bottom. But I mean, imagine this. I mean, imagine if ADA Bitcoin were to do something similar and come down here into a potential Bitcoin USD bottom, bounce around a little, and then half a year after its bottom against half a year after Bitcoin USD's bottom, maybe then ADA bottoms against Bitcoin, not necessarily because Bitcoin USD is going down. It could just simply be the same reason as over here, and because Bitcoin is going up. You might wonder, well, what would cause that? I mean, Bitcoin's been relatively weak over the last year. Well, I would say one thing that could potentially cause it would be altcoin regulation, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that all altcoins are going to die, but it means that it would probably help clean up some of the some of the ones that are really not worthwhile. So yeah, I do think this is a scenario that is worthwhile to consider, that ADA Bitcoin could easily make a plunge at some point in the coming months. And one thing to look at here too is that, and we've seen this happen throughout this bear market, is that when you put in these higher lows and you're in a bear market, which I mean, until proven otherwise, I don't really see any reason to assume any different. So far, it's been working out pretty well. When you look at these higher lows, they don't tend to hold, right? I mean, that's just a fact, right? Like ADA Bitcoin, it put in a low in May, and then a slightly higher low in later part of May, a higher low in October, a higher low in November. But listen, I think eventually this is actually going to break out to the downside. It could be because Bitcoin's going up. It could be because Bitcoin's going down and ADA is going down quicker. But these patterns typically don't hold in these bear markets. You can go look at what Bitcoin has done, right? Just take a look. I mean, Bitcoin has had no shortage of putting in its own higher lows. And of course, anytime it does this, a lot of people like to use that as a reason to be bullish. But listen, I mean, when you're just in a bear market and you're talking about higher lows, I mean, it's just like a bear flag, right? Like it's a weak signal, and it usually breaks down to the downside. I mean, this has happened so many times now for Bitcoin USD, that these higher lows just really don't mean anything. Yes, you can hold it for a while. Eventually, it breaks down. Same thing, I think, with same potential outcome here with ADA Bitcoin as we get into the next few months. And so really, probably the next video I do on ADA won't be until 2023. Maybe the first quarter of 2023. And we'll compare it. When we get into maybe sometime in the first quarter of 2023, we'll look at this chart and see where we are. And see if it just is it bleeding right into this and sort of carrying out the same type of bleed that we saw during the last cycle. It's just that rather than capitulate quickly and get a bottom in and then bounce back up, it's just a slow bleed. Is that what's happening? We'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens here over the next 2 to 3 months, and really where Bitcoin USD goes, because we know, from a seasonality standpoint, Bitcoin's bear market is now just over a year. And even though it's just over a year, it still isn't even the longest bear market that Bitcoin has had. If you look at all prior bear markets, the longest one was actually the one back that started in late 2013 and lasted until early 2015. And the green line is Bitcoin's current bear market. So Bitcoin still remains well within the context of its own bear market. And ADA still remains well within the context of its bear market as well, if you take it all the way down to the low in March 2020. So again, just one way to look at the data. I'm not going to just put on the face of being bullish if we continue to just simply be bearish. And we've talked about this throughout the year about how it's just a bear market, and you might as well just call it what it is, manage your risk accordingly, and hopefully by the time a lot of these altcoins have actually hit major bottoms, hopefully you have some cash to actually come into the market and hopefully you don't just blow it all on every single counter trend rally every step of the way down. Again, we do have the Black Friday sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium. So make sure you check that out. We do talk more, a lot more about the markets there. So check it out. Link is in the description below, and of course, you'll get access to my website and more. So check that out, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe. See you guys later.